Hey, Dallas, welcome to the show.
Hey, Brittany. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Very happy to have you on here. Do you remember when we first met? It was a long time ago. You've been one of my little FemTech mentees that have been around for a while. Do you remember?
Yeah, no, I do. I was reflecting on this before we started chatting here. It was through the Guild Academy with Anne Coquette. And this was like when I was just getting into thinking about, entrepreneurship and where I had a fit within this crazy space. And I was going through this accelerator program, like taking an idea to launch. And you came in as a guest speaker and just gave like this fantastic, enthusiastic, um, presentation on women's health and just like where we need help and what's going on in the space. And it was like, holy shit, that's it.
That's so great. I'm so glad that you remember that because I do so many speaking engagements. I meet so many founders that sometimes I lose track of where we originally met. So shout out to Anne Coquette. She just had her own baby and she bought a blueberry farm in Washington or Oregon. I can't remember. But Anne,
Oh my
shout out to
God.
you. And shout out to the Guild. It's an amazing virtual community for female founders trying to start their business. So that's so awesome. Well, I'm so glad you've come so far from being in that ideas accelerator to being
Yeah,
on the show.
crazy. It's pretty surreal sometimes, but yeah, happy to like have had you in my corner this whole time. It's been
Aw,
fantastic.
yes, of course. Well, we always love to kick off our interviews with learning more about you personally. Where are you from? Where do you currently live? Which I know right now is a little different because you're working remote, but tell us a little bit more about your background and your story.
For sure. So I grew up in Canada, specifically in a rural town in southwestern Ontario. So I grew up with horses and chickens and just a lovely little rural time. And then I went to Vancouver, BC, and studied business there. And that's really where I explored the world of entrepreneurship. I first got started mentoring and coaching small business and local entrepreneurs, working primarily with Indigenous entrepreneurs. And this was a fantastic opportunity and experience for me going into remote communities and running workshops and working with their chambers of commerce and really working alongside these entrepreneurs and helping them with business plans and revenue models and their strategic growth. And that was super fun. I loved that job. But around the same time, I was going through some journeys within my health experience and specifically with birth control and with not being able to find an option that I liked and going through years of a grueling trial and error process. And this really opened me up to how much we just don't know in the space and how much there's a lack of information and a lack of support. So I really wanted to take matters into my own hands and create a solution that I wish I had, and also to help my friends who are also experiencing these struggles. And so Reya kind of grew up from that. And we met around the time where I was like, okay, what is this going to be? What do I do? And yeah, grew into this founder journey that I am now on.
Amazing. What is Reya Health?
So we have a digital platform for reproductive health counseling, and we're just starting with birth control. So we use smart algorithms to match young people to the right birth control option for them and help them track and monitor their use of that option. So outlining birth control boundaries and tracking any side effects or the overall symptoms of that option.
Why was this something you were passionate about building?
Really, from my experience with birth control and just feeling totally lost and isolated through that process. So I started birth control when I was about 16 or 17, and I knew there were condoms and the pill. And I was starting to be sexually active. So I'm like, I'm trying to be proactive about my health. I should go and, get birth control. So I go to my family doctor, who's a older white male, and had a very awkward conversation about a pill, and was given an option that I can't remember the name of now because it was just kind of, thrown at me. And that, kicked off experiencing side effects that I really wasn't comfortable with and changes in my body that I was not prepared for, was not warned about. And so tried different options, had the same experiences, tried a few different pills, tried the IUD, a bunch of different options under the sun, and all of which just left me feeling totally unlike myself. The IUD in particular, I started to develop ovarian cysts that were so painful. The best the doctors could do was give me a doctor's note so that I was excused from university classes, but I just couldn't get out of bed because the pain was so debilitating. I had a couple of instances where I was admitted to the hospital because of this debilitating pain and experiences, and that was the last straw for me. I was like, this is insane. It should not be this difficult to find a birth control option that I feel confident with and like comfortable using. So I ended up taking a step back, removing my IUD, which was like a breath of fresh air for my mental health, my physical well-being. And I started doing research, and I really wanted to understand all about birth control and the female body and how those two can work well together, and really why they weren't working well for me at the time. And through that process, I found an option that I thought could work well for me and went to my doctor, asked for it, and I ended up using that option for years. One of the best birth control methods that I tried. That experience in itself was so empowering and liberating for me that I wanted to share it with my friends and family. And around the same time, I was trying to figure out my next move. And actually, COVID happened, and I was out of a job and just kind of, I thought, okay, well, let's just see what we can do with this, taking my experience and sharing it with friends and family. And Reya grew from that.
Whoa, I have a lot of questions and I want to break down a lot of that story. But before I forget, let me ask you, what was the final solution? Was it a type of pill, but like a different variety? Or was it like, what was the final thing that actually worked for you?
So I went on a low dose triphasic pill. So this worked really well for me because I was really interested in having something, of course, that had a low hormonal dose, but also with that triphase. So throughout the 3-week pack of those active ingredient pills, the hormonal dose changes. And this is intended to replicate the different hormonal fluctuations throughout a person's menstrual cycle. And I was really stoked on that idea.
That essentially has led you to feel healthy and sane and good.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And I mean, I used that option for over 2 years and it was great. I really, really enjoyed it.
And that's all you needed, you know? You went through all these pills and IUDs, which in itself is very painful. It's a day-long procedure, not the whole procedure, but your recovery is like the whole day out of your day. You're putting something past your cervical boundary into your uterus, right? So, wow, this is incredible. Let's back up a little bit here. First of all, you're 16, proactively getting birth control. That's totally a Canadian thing to do and not US, not because we're not proactive young women in this country, but because the vast majority of states in the United States don't even require sex ed to be scientifically valid, which is insane. That's a real fact, y'all. And then I think there's like 12 states that mandate abstinence only. Like it's crazy. It's crazy. So the fact that you're 16, proactively getting birth control, kudos to you. Kudos to your country. Go Justin Trudeau. So what, when you did approach your physician and you said, you know, older white male, you know, what was that experience like? Because one of the things I like about your website, Reya Health, is that like it handholds you. It feels like your friend, right? That's actually what you say on your homepage. You're like, this is your best friend through your birth control process. I presume that physician was not your best friend, right? Like, what was that experience like to go there? Like, was your mom in the room? Like, and if you don't recall, that's fine, but I'm just trying to dig into that experience first.
Yeah. So I went by myself, actually. I was driving at the time and booked an appointment. And, you know, I'm very blessed that I have very supportive parents, but sex ed in Canada is still varying. My experience with sexual health education was like next to none, really.
All right, never mind Canada. Sorry, still love you, but I actually meant Dallas's parents are awesome.
You learn like, oh, this is how you put a condom on, and like, be careful if you have sex, there's STIs in pregnancy, and that's about it. Our like health is maybe one class a day, or sorry, one day in our health class. So super limited in that capacity. So going into that doctor's visit, I really had no idea what to ask. I didn't really know what I wanted. I knew, birth control, of course, but I had no idea where to begin, where to start. And it was a little awkward. Like, this doctor also saw my dad, who I was not, talking about.
Yeah.
And this is often a lot of people's experiences. Yeah. So these conversations, a lot is unfortunately left out, and we're not digging deep and having these in-depth conversations that really promote, finding that perfect match for somebody. So we get into this problem of doctors, going through this process of course, figuring out if there's any contraindications, why that person shouldn't have a certain option or use a certain option. But doctors are also really busy people, and they may only have 10 or 15 minutes with each patient, and that's really not enough time to dive deep into these, all the different options available, the potential side effects, what you should be prepared for when going to try one of these options, and really having a full picture of that person's preferences and lifestyle. So what often ends up happening, and what happened to me in this initial conversation, was that, the doctors have what they're most familiar with, or what if they have free samples of something, and that's not always what's best for that particular person. So in my case, I went in, didn't really have a question, or, this conversation was sort of pushed along, and he was like, well, just try this one. And I'm like, okay, if you say so. And that happens all too often. And I think that's a huge root of this problem, why people are having to try 5 or more different options and take an average of 2 years to find an option that they like, or they give up. And that's not, the birth control world that we should be living in. And people shouldn't have to settle for side effects and this grueling trial and error process.
Yeah. I didn't even know there was multiple types of the pill. Like, I just thought the pill was the pill was the pill. I have my own experience, poor experience with birth control. And I've talked about it on previous episodes. I once was on a pill that when I had my period, my breasts grew twice in size, which was sometimes really cool, but also really painful. Like, I couldn't work out that week. Like, I couldn't, like, my chest was sore. Like, it was crazy. And I eventually went to the doctor because I was a PhD student. I really didn't have that much time. Eventually went to the doctor for something else. And I said, by the way, while I'm here, my birth control like increases my breast to like almost a D cup. And she was like, what? Like, what are you on? Here, let me look. And then she was like, wow, this is super high in hormones. Like, you do not need that high. And I remember the reason I got put on that one was because previously my period was like breaking through when it shouldn't be on the wrong weeks. And that physician must have been like, oh, we'll change you to this one with higher hormones. And it did make my period happen when it needed to happen, but it also resulted in my body like really going into full blown pregnancy almost, and so like, and then, and I've shared on this show before that I've had an abortion, and that abortion, or that pregnancy, was caused by changing birth control pills. I was in between pills. I was, I didn't have my period. I thought maybe it's because I'm changing pills, but it was because I got pregnant, and so sometimes the symptoms are ovarian cysts. Sometimes the symptoms are pregnancy, right? Like, it could be so bad. Let's dive into that. What are all the symptoms that women can experience from the pill? Because yes, I've had some of these symptoms, but I've heard women say like, I go crazy on birth control. Like, what are they talking about when they say that?
Yeah, and this is something that unfortunately we really just don't have enough information on. There's, of course, those common side effects that people experience, but there's other experiences that people have that are not, unfortunately, at this stage, statistically significant to be included in those like common side effects that people do warn you about, but their experiences are still totally valid. And I think that is super disheartening for people to have those lived experiences, going to their physician and being like, this is how I feel. And they're like, well, there's no evidence to say that that is from your birth control. And like, that is so disheartening and, you know, dismissing of that person's
you're a human and you're like, yeah, but I started this pill, this symptom happened. I stopped taking the pill, the symptom didn't happen. Like, you know, just because you didn't read it on New York Times, like, it's my life. I know
this is still happening to me, for sure. And that's totally valid. So when I'm talking about these side effects that people can experience, they're unfortunately the ones that we only have information for. So call out to all researchers. But oftentimes when people experience negative side effects, it's generally from the hormones and side effects associated with these hormones. And this is when the dose, or so the level of estrogen or progestin within the option that they're using is not compatible. So they should either have a higher dose or a lower dose, or the type of progestin used in that birth control method is not compatible with them. So there are a few different generations of progestins, and some have different effects on the endometrium. And this is really important to pay attention to when someone is experiencing a certain side effect. There can be an association to a certain progestin generation that is causing them to have that experience. And even if we just change that small little thing within the active ingredient of an option, it can be monumental in that person's use of that option and how they're feeling and what changes their body undergoes. So, you know, some common ones across the board are mood changes, mood swings, changes within someone's sex drive or their libido. Skin is a huge one, and weight gain is something.
What do you mean by skin? Give us the gory details here. What do you mean by skin?
Yep. So acne, changing in blemishes. So either, you know, somebody could experience dry skin, or someone could then experience oily skin, or having pimples or acne that they never had before or didn't have as much of. If someone is already has acne, it could perpetuate that. And on the flip side, birth control can assist in these areas if it's matched properly. So people go on birth control for all sorts of reasons beyond just pregnancy prevention. And a big one is, you know, skin and helping manage that, helping manage painful periods or symptoms from other conditions like PCOS and endometriosis. And sometimes this is often left out of the conversation and is totally valid. You know, I know a few of my friends went on birth control when they were pretty young and they weren't even sexually active, and they were scared to do that openly because, you know, unfortunately our society shames people who have sex at a certain age, what is, you know, that it's a whole other conversation.
Yes, it
is. But no, birth control can help some of these symptoms that people are experiencing, or could perpetuate them in a negative way.
Yeah, it's so funny you say that, because the reason I got put on birth control at 13 is because I was having ovarian cysts, to the point that I had to have surgery to remove a very large one that if it exploded, I would have gone kind of toxic sepsis inside.
That must have been so scary as a 15-year-old.
You know what, Dallas? It was the scariest part, and this is so sad. I want to hug 13-year-old Britt. The scariest part was whether or not I should shave my pubic hair. And I swear to God, that was my biggest concern as a 13-year-old girl who hadn't had my period.
I also want to hug 13-year-old Britt.
I just want to hug her, because I got my first period on my 13th birthday. I'll never forget. I went to the movie theater with some girlfriends, and I got my period at the movie theater, 13th birthday, true story. But I must have been maybe like 8 months into my period, and I was getting a lot of pain, and then eventually I was getting so much pain that my mom was like, all right, this is not gas, like something's wrong. And she took me in, and they did ultrasound, huge cyst, and they said, okay, we need to go do surgery in 2 days, so tomorrow you need to see an OB-GYN for the first time in your life, tomorrow, and then the next day she's going to do surgery on you, she or he. And it was an old lady, was my OB-GYN, God bless her, wherever she is in the world. I'm sure she's retired by now. And my biggest concern was whether or not, when I saw her for my pre-op and then during surgery, if I should shave my pubic hair or not, because my biggest concern was if I don't, they'll think I'm like weird because I've heard, or i.e. watched through porn, like that's, women are mostly not hairy. And then I thought, but if I do, they'll think I'm a slut. I know, little 13-year-olds like in the world. I just want to hug all of them because like that's literally when you say what was your biggest fear, that was my biggest fear. So anyways, fast forward, I had the surgery, got put on birth control, and that's essentially the story, is that I've been on birth control since 13. And through this show, I've actually considered maybe I should get off hormonal birth control because there's like, this incredible industry is teaching me all this stuff. But I actually have been thinking, I don't know if I can because I have this ovarian cyst issue. So like, what are even my solutions? Like, what do I do? Like for me, the cyst forms when the egg is released. So like, I need to not ever release eggs, and maybe copper IUDs and a non-hormonal option, or Phexxi still lets your ovary ovulate. Anyways, but I'm in a conundrum. I'm in a pickle, right? Where I'm like, I need this so I don't ovulate, so I don't get a cyst, so I don't get surgery. But I also like, what if I want to live my life any other way besides taking hormones every day,
Totally. And so many people experience this same conundrum that it's like, what are the trade-offs, that we're going through the cost benefit. And unfortunately, like we're at this great place in time where we do have a lot of options and access to options, but we still need more and more information on birth control and these comorbidities and how they work well together, and how they can, support one another and that transition off, I
feel like there needs to be a solution for ovarian cysts, because I feel like I hear a lot about it, and I hear like it's just almost like what your doctor said, where it's just like, well, no more IUD for you. We're going to switch to this, or like keep your IUD, but we'll give you an absentee pass. It's like, cannot be the solution here, y'all.
No, my solution was literally like, suck it up. You're still in this, trial phase of this new option. Your body's still adjusting. I'm like, it's been 6 months. I get that. I get like, that your body has to adjust, but I've been patient.
Yes.
And they're like, just keep holding on. And so that was actually a big thing that's formed into one of our primary features at Reya, is like your birth control boundaries. So what are you as an individual willing to tolerate in terms of changes within your body and your day-to-day experience? And, if your birth control goes beyond that boundary or starts pushing it, like, what are we going to do about it? What do you want to do about it? And let's have a conversation around it and really put you at the forefront and your needs and desires.
Yeah, so empowering. This is such a great conversation. Actually, also reminds me, like literally every woman in our lives, we have a story of this, right? Like, so my sister had the injected in a shot of birth control, and she bled like crazy, like full blown heavy flow for multiple months. She was hospitalized because she was so anemic, and they were like, you're due for your shot. And like, she's like, I'm hospitalized because I have no more blood left. And they were like, just trust the process. This is a rare side effect, but like, that's fine. And I was like, and this is pre-FemTech Focus for me. And I'm like, that doesn't seem normal, that the doctors are like, I know you're losing all your blood to the point that we have to supplement it, but like, here's another shot. Like, what? Yeah. Every woman has a story. If you're a man listening, I promise you, ask a woman in your life. This is the
story. Yeah. And it's so, eye-opening to me and sad to me when I have these conversations with men and they're like, oh, I had no idea that was a problem. I'm like, who do you hang out with? Do you not have what?
But I'm very pro men in the show of men, I love you, but I think it's not their fault all the way, right? There's a certain amount of curiosity I invite them to have, but also like society tells us to hide our tampons in our sleeve, right? Like, so why would we talk about like, oh, I'm on my 10th day of heavy menstrual bleeding? Like, we don't necessarily you know, how often do you see in a boardroom a woman say, oh, excuse me, my period just came, I need to run to the restroom? Like, we're not allowed to say things like that, really.
One day.
Yeah. I was at the gym this week and I had a huge camel toe and I left it because I was like, this is what my body looks like. You know, no one's going to shame me to pull my camel toe out.
No, we need to be doing that. And it's so true. Like, me now being in this space, like, I feel like it's my personal prerogative and like my obligation to have more of these conversations openly in front of men. And like, I can do that. I'm comfortable doing that. And I feel like it's my calling to do that. And maybe people, like, you know, they might be a little bit uncomfortable, but invite them into that conversation and share openly. Luckily for me, it's been my experience where they're very open to, you know, receiving that and like very empathetic and compassionate.
They have questions. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Well, we've gone down a rabbit hole, which I'm known to do, and I love it and I don't mind whatsoever. But I do want to ask you, how many types of birth control are there?
Yeah, this is a wonderful question. And it's kind of multi-layered. So you can categorize birth control in a number of different ways. And overall, there's about, you know, a dozen options, but then there's multiple options within each. So for starters, you can categorize birth control in non-hormonal and hormonal options. On the non-hormonal side, you have things like your barrier methods, so internal and external condoms, and these are the only ones that protect against sexually transmitted infections. And then you have things like the diaphragm and the contraceptive sponge, fertility awareness method. So a few different ones underneath of that umbrella. And then on the hormonal side, it's, you know, tons, and it can be messy, but we have the hormonal IUD, the pill, which we talked about, has so many different types underneath of it. So you have progestin-only pills and different types of progestin-only pills under that. You have the combo pill and different types under that. The extended options like Seasonal and Seasonique. So there's a lot to even just unpack on the OCP side of things. We then have, as we've talked about here briefly, the Depo, so Depo-Provera, the shot, implant.
Oh yeah, the implant in the arm. Kate Morton, founder of Funk It Wellness. She was like, yep, I had symptoms and they couldn't find the freaking thing. They put my arm, it had like migrated somewhere, and they were like, you'll need major surgery for us to dig into your bicep. And she was like, what? Like, I have to decide between the symptoms I'm, you know, my life's ruining, or like getting this surgery to dig into my arm. Anyways, yeah.
So, and to be fair, there per country and even per state, different options are available in different places. So the implant for us actually in Canada wasn't available until just this past fall.
Whoa.
Though it had been available in over 30 countries for nearly a decade.
Yeah.
That's just, you know, registration things. The implant is, you know, totally safe and people use it. People have been using it for years. Sometimes it works better for other people than it does for some, but yeah, so it is varying across the board. So some people might have different access to options, but generally those are like the buckets. If you will.
Are you able to just kind of from your gut, regardless of country and what is offered in your, you know, your where you live, how many birth controls are there? Like between ring, injections, pills, like what's it kind of a give or take amount?
Including all the different types of like pills and like brand options, probably like 100, over 100.
Over 100.
And it's funny because you're in the US, I'm in Canada. We could have the same pill, basically the same active ingredient, and you'll have like 5 different brand names and different variations of it. And like Canada might have like 5 different brand names and variations of it, but it's like essentially the same.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Wow. And is there any birth control for men besides condoms?
I mean, abstinence, withdrawal method. That's one that's like very, you know, widely used. Condoms, and there should be more. I know that there are.
That's the point I was getting to. Because it's like well over 100 for women and like withdrawal for men. I had a friend in my PhD program, and he was actually working in a laboratory trying to study sperm. Like, we can make a drug against sperm, y'all. Come on, we can do this. Yeah. And I remember in his, like, he was practicing for his like defense, and he had the problem slide, right? Kind of similar to a pitch deck. And it was like a Venn diagram of all the ways that women have birth control. And then men, it said condoms. And then it was a Venn diagram. And so the thing in the middle said withdrawal. And I didn't realize what withdrawal was. And I was like, what's withdrawal? And he was like, it's pulling out. And I was like, oh my God, pulling out is in your freaking PhD thesis. And he's like, it's like all there. That's like one of the options for men. And he put it in the center because he was like, he considered it a dual choice for pull out, right? But it's crazy.
It is crazy. And it's, one of those myths, if you will, or, how society has placed the responsibility of birth control on the uterus owner. And that's just, unfair and something that is way overdue to be changed.
How big is the birth control market?
In terms of like,
I guess global, or give us Canada or North America, but like how much money is this market?
Yeah, well, there's nearly 1 billion people worldwide who use some sort of birth control, and this is just solely female solutions.
And how many women are in the world?
About 4 billion. So
like a quarter of all women are on some form of birth control. That's a big market size. We may as well be talking about the market size of toilet paper, or like, like an everyday commodity that the majority of the world has access to, right? Like, because that's a huge amount. Wow, that's a huge amount. And do you, working in the space, are you seeing a lot of innovation in birth control? I mean, I've heard there's some companies trying to work on a male birth control. Phexi, I'm big fan of Phexi and Evofem Biosciences, their pH modulating birth control. But is there other innovations happening?
Yeah, there are, for sure, which is really exciting to see. As you say, there's some companies now tackling the male contraceptive problem, and like super excited for this.
I know.
I think there's been more of a push and a call, and I think this is an area of women's health and femtech that needs more innovation, but certainly coming more into light of more non-hormonal options. We are quite limited in this capacity right now. So there is fertility awareness method, and this is a great option. However, it can sometimes be like super inaccessible for people. Yeah. It requires a lot of daily habit building, and that being very diligent on taking your basal body temperature, tracking a whole bunch of things. And that's not everyone's day-to-day experience or capacity.
Yeah. And the consequence, if you're in the United States, could be that you may live in Texas and not even have access to abortion. So like the consequence is you're going to be a mom, you're going to have a baby, because what else do? You don't have a backup plan there.
Totally. And then we're back at this like dilemma of, okay, do I go through these, bleeding till I'm anemic or ovarian cyst, or, risk pregnancy? And it's like, they're both very detrimental in someone's life if it's, premature, and you're picking between the lesser of two evils, and that should not be the case. Birth control is healthcare, and it should not be this difficult. Again, going on down a rabbit hole here, but non-hormonal methods, I think there's a lot of room for improvement and expansion. I know there was one option that came out relatively recent. It's called Ballerine.
Oh yeah.
And I
think it's an IUD.
It is, and it's like a different shaped IUD, so it morphs a little bit more to the curves of somebody's uterus or movement in the body, whereas the IUD is like a stationary little object. But this option still uses I believe it's the copper material, so it's non-hormonal, and it's supposed to have lesser side effects in terms of bleeding and cramping, because it is a little bit more fluid in the design, from my understanding.
Yes, I actually know. It's Ocon, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Ocon is the company, OCON, and they're out of Israel. And you're right. Instead of a T-shaped device, it's a sphere. It's a sphere essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So we got to get Karen on the show. I know Karen's the CEO. We got to get her on the show.
Yes.
What is the current physician like protocol for prescribing birth control? We just talked about there could be potentially over 100 different types to choose from. So today, how do doctors prescribe which one they pick?
And each physician kind of has their own process of doing this. There's, of course, like going through contraindications, which I'm meaning medical history. So if somebody is at risk for blood clots, or they show migraines with aura, some of these conditions or medications that somebody's on will deem that, them using a hormonal option is unsafe, specifically estrogen. Oftentimes if people have...
Sorry, can you quickly tell us what do you mean by the migraines?
Yeah, so there's been studies that have shown that if people have migraines with aura, so if they kind of, I don't have migraines, so can't really speak to it, but if they are seeing things that kind of have like a light aura around objects, this will indicate that estrogen, for whatever reason, is incompatible with their body. So they
what? That seems so random, but also like, why the hell don't we understand that? Like, that's really crazy because migraines disproportionately affect women and we don't know why. And so the fact that you're gonna not prescribe estrogen-based birth control because it's not good for women with migraines and you said aura, I kept thinking the aura ring and I was like, aura ring, giving people migraines. No, you mean like seeing stuff while you have a migraine. Wow, that's a crazy, crazy thing. Okay.
And I just lack the medical context to really explain why, but generally with somebody who has severe headaches or migraines, they would be okay, but it's when they have that aura piece within it that like goes the different level. So this is one of those major questions that all physicians ask when having the conversation about which birth control could work for somebody. And then beyond the like major contraindications and going through someone's medical history, this is when we get into what the particular interest is of the physician in this area. So some physicians are super excited and passionate about women's health and contraceptives and having these conversations with their patients. So they may spend 30 minutes plus with an individual going through all of their preferences, lifestyle, all the different options, and this is fantastic. There are also women's health clinics and in Canada, sexual health clinics that are solely dedicated to having these types of conversations, which is fantastic. Unfortunately, not everybody has access to these services. So we're, trying to meet people where they're at. But within the like general contraceptive counseling conversation, it's overall like quite basic, but varying depending on, where the interest lies of that physician.
And when you say where the interest lies, do you mean like with their own personal preferences? Like, I don't know, like, is that what you mean?
Kind of like generally within our market research and what we've seen taking place, female doctors take more time than male doctors in the contraceptive counseling process generally. Other female doctors may go out of their way to get further up to date on the different options. They might do their own reading, or they just have a particular interest in women's health and in the contraceptive counseling space that they are more excited and willing to have these longer conversations.
Dallas, this has been such an awesome conversation. And if you're looking, listeners, for birth control, trying to figure out which one, definitely check out Reya Health. But we have two last questions for you that our listeners really love. The first one is, we have a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs that listen. So what's an area in women's health that still needs innovating?
Well, non-hormonal birth control options, in my personal opinion. But I would love to see some innovation taking place within remote communities and serving people there with these wonderful solutions that we have today. A lot of people just don't have the same equal access to those options just based on where they live. So any innovations and solutions pushing towards increasing that access piece for remote communities would be amazing and incredible. And maybe one day Reya can help with that too.
What do you think the femtech industry as a whole needs the most right now in order to be successful?
I think more females investors and female people within decision-making powers, as well as diverse people in these roles and positions.
Why do you say that?
I think it's just better representation of communities that are disproportionately affected by these issues that we are trying to solve and working towards within femtech, and having those people within the ultimate decision-making roles of where funds are allocated and what happens within this industry. I think we will then really be able to address root causes.
Mm-hmm. Dallas, thank you so much for your time today. I am so proud of you, watching you grow and ask me advice over the years. It's been really cool to see you come to where you are now, which is a live business. It's so awesome.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thanks for making the space for me talking about birth control on this platform, and all of the other support that you provide me and Reya. Thanks so much.